Welcome to Retiring Today. We're diving into an important but sometimes overlooked aspect of retirement. It's legacy planning. We want to talk about some of the common traps and help you avoid those retirement legacy planning traps. Today we're going to cover incorrect beneficiary designations, failing to plan for heirs, not having a will or a trust, lack of power of attorney, and not securing your spouse's future. Hi, I'm Molly Nelson here with Loren Merkle and Chawn Honkomp. They're both certified financial fiduciaries and certified financial planners. Chawn is also a CPA. And Loren, this is so important because people work so hard for their wealth, and there are some things that if they don't do them can really make passing on that wealth really difficult.
And it's really the legacy planning that is often missed, and it makes complete sense because when you're thinking about retiring, if you're a year away from retiring, you're thinking about all the things that you're going to do when you don't have to go to work, and then how are you going to pay for all those things? You're not necessarily thinking about what's going to happen to what's left over when you have your last day, and that's where a lot of mistakes do take place because there's either no plan or an incomplete plan. And if you pass away and you don't have your plan in place, the state that you live in has a plan, it's just not your plan.
Okay, so we want to help people make those legacy decisions, or at least know what's coming, because you haven't made those decisions before. So the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. So let's talk about trap number one, incorrect beneficiary designations.
If you don't have the correct beneficiary designations, that could be a real big problem for you. Nobody wants to pass away and have some of their wealth and assets end up at a place and with a person that they don't want them to. It's oftentimes people end up there without maybe thinking about it. You go through your life, you end up adding new accounts as you work longer, new 401k plans, maybe you open up some IRAs. You've set those beneficiaries maybe years ago, and if you don't think about it, you may not update those when these life events happen. So as time goes by, more accounts, people get married, kids, grandkids, change careers, move states. There's lots of things that could lead to having an incorrect beneficiary designation on some account balance.
Yeah, Loren, and in 20 plus years of retirement planning, you've seen this go the wrong way for people.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do run into circumstances where the beneficiary was overlooked, which is unfortunate on so many different levels. The beneficiary designation is one of the most powerful and simple legacy planning tools that you can implement, which is also why it is also one of the most overlooked. Not that long ago, a gentleman came in for the very first time, and we were talking through what he was going through, and immediately it came out. His wife had just passed away 3 months ago, which is tragic all in itself. And you could tell he was going through some tough times. They were in their mid-50s, so they were planning on a lot of time left together. But tragedy on top of tragedy was that she had two 401k plans, about $500,000 in each one of those 401k plans, and neither of them had a beneficiary designated. So mind you, this is 3 months later that we're having a conversation, and he has still not taken receipt of that $1 million that could be his for retirement because he is going through all the jumps that he has to go through to take receipt of this money, when all that had to be done was simple beneficiary designations. He would have had that money within a couple weeks, and then he could move on to what's most important in those time frames, which is to try to heal and move on with his life.
So here's how to avoid those traps. First, review beneficiaries regularly, at least maybe once a year and after any major life changes. Number two, work with an estate planning attorney to ensure that some of those designations are correct. And also you want to work with your retirement planner to make sure it all fits together with your retirement plan. And third, consider a trust if leaving money to minors or dependents with special needs. Let's get to retirement legacy planning trap number two, failing to plan for heirs. Of course, without a structured inheritance plan, again, it's kind of like beneficiaries, the money can go, the state has a plan. If you don't have a plan, the money will go somewhere, but with a plan, it will go where you want.
It takes some intention to develop that plan. It takes time to start thinking about what people want that to look like, start identifying what your goals are so that you are committed to this, and you can think of the different circumstances and what people are looking for as that money passes along to their heirs. They've got to start thinking about the family situations and stage of life. You don't know when you're going to pass away either. So any of us could pass away when we possibly have minor children. That's a totally different situation that has its own steps and hurdles. It might be, early in retirement. It might be later in life. So the better option to have is make sure to have that plan in place well before that big life event happens.
And there's a couple specific ways you could include that communication with your heirs. One of the ways is you can invite your heirs into the planning sessions with your advisors. We do that all the time with the families and individuals that we serve. We invite, or they invite their kids into these sessions, and those conversations can look a lot of different ways based on how you want that to look. Meaning the kids can have very detailed involvement in those conversations where they know the dollar amounts that's in each account, or it can be more high level and just an educational experience where mom and dad have an IRA that's never been taxed before. So if you inherit this IRA, here's the tax implications, here's the things to look out for, right? Just the rules of the road as you go. So that's one way that you can communicate to the kids, or you can just sit down with them and say whatever it is you want to say, whether they are going to be beneficiaries, what level of beneficiaries, who else should be included, just so that everybody is on the same page in the event you do pass away. They're not lost. They can find the material of where your accounts and statements are. Just that type of communication can go a long way when people are going through the emotional event already of losing a loved one.
And we're going to get to power of attorney in just a little bit, but I know we've had Charlie Bottenberg on this show, and he said it's a good idea to let them know if they are power of attorney or executor of your will, so that when that paperwork needs to be tracked down, or you may have to present that at the hospital, they know that they're the person that's supposed to have it, or maybe even have a copy of it on hand.
Oftentimes with a passing, there's a surprise of that passing. You don't want the financial surprise as well. So if any of your kids or your heirs have some control when you do pass away over your financial affairs, or if you become incapacitated over your financial and health affairs, it's good to communicate that so they are aware, and maybe they can even do some research as far as what that role looks like, so they are adequately prepared in the event something like that happens.
Okay, so what we're talking about now is mostly when you pass, but some of the legacy planning, if you rewind a little bit, when you first start planning for retirement, some of the legacy planning that you help people do does include looking at the money that they possibly pass on and making it a little bit more tax efficient, because we know sometimes if you pass it on to your kids at a certain stage of their life, you may be hitting them with a real big tax bill, and sometimes you make some strategic moves based on that.
The tax plan is an extremely valuable part of what we do. Everybody at the end of the day, you want to pay the least amount of tax as possible over your entire journey, which when it comes to legacy plan, sometimes you got to look at that journey as beyond how long we live. Now you're looking at that next generation and potentially grandkids. So maybe now we're into that third generation. So there's things that you can do today that end up having less of your estate and your assets go to Uncle Sam and the IRS, and more of it to yourself, your kids, and all your future generations.
Yeah, Loren, sometimes that looks like Roth conversions or other strategic investment moves.
Yeah, there are many tax planning strategies that you can incorporate to save yourself money in taxes while you're alive and using your assets, but also can save your kids a lot of money from a tax standpoint, which is really what people are trying to do, is optimize what it is that you've worked so hard to save while you're alive, but also once you've gone.
We'll continue talking about retirement legacy traps and how to avoid them next. Now it's time for trap number 3, not having a will or trust. And Loren, it's kind of shocking. There are a lot of Americans who don't have a will, and they could be leaving their estate subject to the laws in the state they live in.
It is kind of shocking in one sense when we look at a large percentage of the U.S. population that does not have a will. And then based on our experience, when we sit down with somebody for the first time and we ask you, do you have a will? The most common response that we get is yes, but the will was when Junior was 12 years old and now Junior's 32. Well, that's better than not having a will, but we still need to update the will, because the implications of not having the will go back to what we talked about before. You have an estate. No matter what the level of assets you have an estate, and there is an estate plan for you. It's just not your plan if you don't have your plan in place.
Yeah, I think depending on what site you look at, something like only about 30% of Americans report that they do have a will. So let's take a look at the trap. The trap of not having a will or a trust could be that your money, again, Chawn, could go somewhere you don't want it to go.
Yeah, you might want, you've got goals and wishes and worked hard to build all this and you want it to go somewhere, but without having this written down, you're losing some of the control of ensuring that that's what happens. Now you've got more people maybe having to get together to make decisions. Maybe it's the court now coming in and directing certain things. And it's certainly going to take a while longer. It's going to be a lot slower too, which can not be the best experience. So having that will in place, put it in writing, you're more likely to achieve the goals.
Yeah, and it's easy to do. We know it can happen because of procrastination, believing that your assets might automatically go to the right person, or relying on some kind of verbal agreement. But a plan is the best way to go, just like with an overall retirement. So let's talk about the types of plans that are available, because there's a will and a trust, and it's important that people know the difference between the two.
Yeah, the primary difference between the will and the trust is what is the legal proceeding to get the assets to whom you want that to go to. With a will, it has to go through the court process, which is called probate. And there's nothing wrong with probate except for the things that are wrong with probate. And in the state of Iowa, some of the troublesome aspects of probate is it takes much longer for those assets to transition and for your estate to close. I work with an estate attorney here, and he says right now it takes about 18 months on average to close out that estate. That's the biggest difference between a will and a trust. Anything that goes through the will goes through the probate process. Anything that goes through the trust bypasses probate and then goes more direct to the heirs, the intended beneficiaries of your assets.
And I always feel like a trust does sound like something that's for the ultra wealthy, but you find that a lot of the families that you work with, a trust is the right fit. Why did they come to that conclusion, Chawn?
And often, a lot of times it can start with the level of assets that someone has. You know, if you've got financial assets and you've got beneficiaries on there, that alone doesn't mean that you need to have a trust. But now if we get outside of the financial assets, meaning real estate, physical assets, collections, you know, car collections, things of value that don't allow you to have a beneficiary on them, that can be a big reason that people start having more conversations around wanting to have a trust. Also, just levels of control. You know, if you've got kids, you know, while you're younger, they're minors, they can't make decisions in the eyes of the state until their age of majority. Even beyond that, a lot of conversations, a lot of people don't want to pass along a material amount of money, maybe when their kids are 20, 25, 30. You know, you have some goals, you want them to make sure that they're taken care of, but maybe they've still got to work their way through life. So if you want a higher level of control and more likely for that to happen, you can put stronger wording in a trust and say, okay, at 25, you get a little bit, 30, 35, and now you can build that picture and that estate plan as you want it to be.
Okay, so how to avoid the trap. Have a legally binding will. Even a simple one sometimes can be better than nothing. Consider a trust if you want more control over how the assets are distributed. And work with an estate planning attorney and a retirement planner to ensure everything is legally sound. Let's talk about trap number 4, lack of power of attorney. And this comes down to the question of, Loren, who will make decisions for you if you become incapacitated?
Yeah, from a financial standpoint as well as a health standpoint. So let's take those a little bit separately. From a health standpoint, when you become incapacitated, you can no longer make sound decisions based on your health. The power of attorney, the health power of attorney, is going to give somebody control then to help you make those decisions on your behalf. And one of the key aspects of the health power of attorney is you want to make sure whomever you designate as that power of attorney has some kind of level of experience with the healthcare industry or health decisions. And that's why if let's say you have a larger family, maybe you have 3 or 4 kids, it may not be best to name all of them as healthcare power of attorney. Maybe name the one that has the most experience, and then that person is going to be the best suited to make those decisions in the event that something does happen from a health standpoint.
Yeah, and I think of this too, kind of like what you talked about with a probate versus a trust. So probate can take a lot longer than if you have a trust. If you don't have a power of attorney in place, I was reading about this a little bit, and a lot of homes have gone into foreclosure because while someone was incapacitated, no one was able to get the mortgage paid. And that's the last thing you want to have happen. And a power of attorney could really obviously prevent this.
Yeah, that's an essential part of the need to have the financial power of attorney, is that life goes on even while you become incapacitated, you know, can't take care of yourself, not alert to be able to make those decisions. Bills continue to need to be paid. Life happens. And without that structure in place, there can be some bad events that come out of that because you haven't put anybody in a position to be able to take care of the things that need to be addressed during that time period. So we've got to make sure we're thinking about that financial power of attorney. I think both of these, it's got to be somebody you trust, right? It can be a very important decision. Make sure you assign those powers and that authority to somebody that you trust. and somebody you believe is going to be looking out for your best interest.
And this is really important for those who are single because you don't have that spouse here on spot to help make those decisions. But it's also really important if you're currently married because oftentimes a spouse will pass away, and then all the things that you're involved with when your spouse passes, things become a little bit overwhelming. And at that point in time, are you really thinking about adding a healthcare power of attorney, going through all of that stuff, and then something happens to you and then it's not in place? And that's why when we develop our plans, we develop the legacy plan in conjunction with the other pillars of the plan, the income and the tax and the healthcare and the investment. All of that needs to be developed together because time goes by quickly and it's easy to lose focus on these things. Having it in place now before anything happens is way better than waiting until later.
We'll continue talking about legacy planning traps to avoid next. Trap number 5, not planning for your spouse's future. And Chawn, you work with a lot of couples and they definitely have it top of mind, but you have to take that next step to plan for your spouse's future because once you're gone, you want to make sure that your surviving spouse is taken care of.
Every spouse out there wants to take care of the remaining spouse if they were the ones to pass away first. So it's such a big part of the conversation and decisions that we help people plan for is that, okay, you've got things in place, and then what if? When life happens, they want to be able to see that and know that to them, that's really what they're going to leave behind, is ensuring that their loved one, their spouse, is going to be in just as strong of a financial condition. They can maintain their lifestyle and continue to live, have the golden years in their retirement journey.
Yeah, and it's one thing to want that for your spouse, and that's important. We know most people do, but then there's some action steps. There's some things you should do, some things you should build into your plan. What are the kinds of things that people need to do now to make sure that their spouse is taken care of when they're gone?
Yeah, 2 real specific things is when you are making your Social Security decisions, make that decision with the future in mind. Think about today, of course. That's the easy part. How much money are you going to receive today? But also, when you pass away, there is a survivorship benefit component to Social Security. So what does that look like for your surviving spouse? Same thing with the pension. If you're married and one of you has a pension, you have a lot of decisions to make with that pension. You can take lump sum, or you can choose a lifetime survivorship option or a lifetime option. Make the decision with today and the future in mind. Oftentimes we do run into scenarios where we have a widow come in and she's explaining the situation that she is in, and they made a decision 10, 15 years ago to take a single life pension, which means when he passed away, that pension income went away, and now she doesn't have that guaranteed income for life, and it left a big hole in her lifestyle income. So those are mistakes that do happen we need to consider now, but let's also consider the future with not 2 of you, but just 1.
You just talked to somebody in a Retire Ready call about a pension decision, kind of a similar scenario.
Yeah, a recent call where the individual we were meeting for the very first time, she had IPERS, right? We work with lots of families that are in careers where they earn that IPERS benefit. And she had a lot of questions about it. She wasn't sure how best to approach it. Those IPERS statements, they send out a lot of different options. There's some nuances to it that it takes a little information, certainly takes some understanding to know, well, what's the trade-off? So we were able to have that phone call, and I was able to share just in that 15 or 20 minute phone call, give her a lot of good information, kind of point her in the right direction, because that was her main thing. That was a decision that she's trying to make, that decision, because she was planning to retire here in the next month or 2, and that was going to get her on path to committing to that retirement date. So making sure that she felt more informed and was able to make a better IPERS decisions was really valuable to her.
So let's continue talking about securing your spouse's future, because part of the planning process, the 6 pillars we talked about, you have a binder that you give people, and that one of those pieces of the binder, it's a thick binder, it's got a lot of information, is legacy planning. And you work with couples on putting some very specific things in there so they have a reference guide to go to if their spouse passes and they need to get to access things quickly.
As a part of anybody's legacy plan, there are very important legal documents that are a part of that. So if you have a will, have a copy of your will. If you have a trust, have a copy of your trust. If you have powers of attorney, make sure you have copies of the powers of attorney documents that spell out what powers you are given and whom you are given those powers to. And you can have that all within the plan. So the Retire Secure roadmap that we put together for our families has a space, a legacy planning space, where all of that can fit in there. So somebody passes away, their kids find this document. Not only does it have all the legacy planning documents that are in there, but as of the date of that plan, it has the different accounts, where those accounts are held, the dollar amounts as of that date, the types of accounts that they have. It just makes all of it much simpler for the beneficiaries, the kids, to come in and then start knocking out this succession checklist of all the things that they have to do. Again, it's such an emotional time when a loved one passes.
Yeah, and that's the big stuff. It can even get as detailed as putting in, the streaming services that you use, the passwords, and thinking like lawn care services. If one spouse is in charge of, they're the contact for the lawn care service, the other spouse might not even, know the account or know how to get a hold of people.
Yeah, the numbers are big, big thing, the bank accounts, but sometimes it's the day-to-day things that might be more stressful. Because you don't know how to pay the utilities bill, you don't want your water getting shut off, those simple little things, even having all those passwords that are out there to be able to log into different accounts and places like that. So it's those day-to-day things that have to be thought of as well and be a part of that conversation so that is a smooth process.
And at this stage of life too, when you're talking about planning for your spouse, life insurance, does this still come into play as you move towards to retirement?
It can come into play in a couple different ways. One is many people at that point in time still have life insurance, but when you bought life insurance 20 years ago, it was for different reasons. And now you're sitting there with this life insurance wondering, how do I use it now? So that is one issue that we need to evaluate. Do you still need it? Do you let it go? If you let it go, how do you let it go? But then also, sometimes people don't have life insurance, and do you need life insurance, or can you implement life insurance in a very strategic way to help you make some of these other decisions, like the pension decisions that we talked about?
And we're going back to pensions because this is, again, something you help people decide. You kind of help someone do sort of a life insurance and pension decision with some analysis.
Yeah, we've got a couple that we've been working with for a few years, and now they just hit a big stage of life where the husband was retiring, has a very strong pension. And we walked through all those options. I mean, almost most pensions out there, you've got the single life that the risk is that ends when that person passes away. And then you've got survivorship options. We helped them do this deep analysis where they ended up making that decision where they were comfortable with the survivorship amount going down to 50%. They're going to get this higher amount right away and for as long as he's alive. When something happens to him, that pension amount, that monthly benefit amount is going to get cut in half. What we did to offset that was we did some analysis and it made sense. His health was good. We put in a $500,000 term policy in place that with the decrease that would happen when he were to pass away, that was going to cover about a 20-year time period, which put them far enough through retirement that they had no concerns. They felt very confident with making that pension decision.
And that strategy can be really powerful, and it's something that most people should look at if they have a pension, because what it accomplished for them is while they were both alive, it gave them more income that they could live the lifestyle that they wanted to. But then when the life insurance owner passed away, the survivor had this tax-free death benefit to help her out when he passed away. So it was the best of both worlds in that scenario, and you just had to get a little creative, a little intentional with the overall plan that can carry them a long way.
Yeah, they had to feel like they just had so much confidence in going into retirement that they'd made an analytical, not an emotional decision.
It's just fun when these one-off things, these unique that very much fit their situation, that we can educate them and make those really good decisions. That feels really good.
Yeah, it's a customized approach. So you can have a customized conversation with a retirement planner by scheduling a Retire Ready call. You can go to retirereadycall.com right now and schedule a call today. This is Retiring Today, and we thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching. Click here for more great videos, and don't forget to subscribe for more retirement planning content.